Alright everyone, today we're going to be discussing a game that I played quite heavily when it was new. This is Need for Speed Carbon on the Xbox 360, a classic Need for Speed title and one that long-standing fans such as myself remember quite well. I think that many consider this to probably be the last solid Need for Speed title. Pretty much after this one, the franchise was trying different things, and that didn't exactly bode well with what people loved about the series, and was kind of a risk factor for the Need for Speed franchise going forward. So it was interesting to play this one after all these years, and also after finally playing one of the franchise's best entries, Need for Speed Most Wanted, which I already talked about years ago, so I'll leave a card up if you haven't seen that video yet. I also wasn't aware back then that this game is a direct sequel to Need for Speed Most Wanted. The beginning of the game actually picks up relatively right after the events of Most Wanted, and you return back to your hometown only to find out that the local street racers basically hate your guts and you were never really a solid guy to begin with. And so in classic Need for Speed style, you engage in these cheesy live-action cutscenes with this very odd filter over the characters, making it seem like they're kind of CGI, but their skin kind of looks like it's made of plastic or something. It just kind of looks really super smooth and akin to something like an Instagram filter in today's world. I guess the best comparison I can make today is that it's almost like someone took the beauty filter in smartphones and just maxed out the slider. Now, Most Wanted had a similar style to this, but in this game I almost feel like they tried to make it even more animated, like they just kept on piling the filters on top of each other. And it's odd to look at in today's perspective, but back then I don't actually recall it being quite so jarring, so take that with what you will. So long story short, you end up losing your iconic BMW M3 in a race, and the entire game is built around you having to take down each of the gang's leaders in their territory and eventually win back your car. Wow. I gotta say, I went into playing this game after all this time with a lot of excitement and optimism, but man, this game isn't quite as decorated as I remember it being. First of all, the game feels rushed, to say the least, and for the record, all of this becomes very evident only if you played Most Wanted beforehand, because otherwise you actually don't realize just how much smaller and less ambitious this game feels next to its bigger brother. But yeah, the entire game just feels significantly shorter. The world is smaller, the variety of locations is much less than what you had in Most Wanted. Even the cars and the mission designs, they all pale in comparison to the previous entry. Now, one neat addition they made is this game's signature rival races. What they basically did is they took the ending of Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift and made it into a gameplay element when it comes to taking over your rival's territory. So you'll race down these really tall canyon trails, rushing to a checkpoint while also trying to stay on the road. Now, meanwhile, your rival is literally on your ass the entire time, or occasionally passing you while also trying to run you off the road and get ahead. And it turns into this kind of nerve-wracking race to the bottom. It's actually done quite well and does add a bit of flair and style to a game where, well, without it would just feel quite uninspired. Now, you also have the addition of crews, and these are basically assisted AI that can help take down other racers, distract or even block them from passing you, or in rare circumstances even win the races on your behalf. The characters in this one actually do feel a bit more important when it comes to the story. You're still a nameless husk, right? You don't actually have a personality, and the entire point of the game is that it's you. You are the one who's going through these events. But I do think that the characters in this entry feel like they have a greater purpose when it comes to the core gameplay. Rather than them just kind of being in the cutscenes and not really involved in the races, they are right next to you the entire time and do make an effort to at least assist you when it comes to you winning these races. And speaking a bit about the rivals themselves, they're exactly what you expect cheesy, obnoxious Need for Speed characters to be. And that's why we love it, right? You can't help but just crack a smile when you're watching these actors just own and obliterate their roles. It's absolutely such a mid-2000s vibe, and Darius and his concept Audi R8 in particular kind of steal the spotlight, and I just felt like I was transported back to 2006 when I was playing this for the first time on my PS2 on my old Sanyo CRT TV. And while we're here, let's take a quick break to look at the box art for Need for Speed Carbon. This is the Xbox 360 version of the game, standard, and I like the box art for this one. I like the cars kind of drifting off the edge of the cliff there. Nice look at the spine. And then on the back it says the battle for the city is won in the canyon. Pretty cool. And you got various different screenshots here, some nice details, represent a class, build your crew. Let's take a look inside. Now, I don't have a manual for this one, but I do have a nice clean copy of the game disc, an original version, and, well, that's what matters most. But you did get a manual when it came to purchasing this game, but unfortunately my copy did not have that. Nice look at the box art. Now, quickly, let's discuss the graphics of the game. I do think visually the game looks okay, but again, I have to say it just doesn't feel as alive as last year's Most Wanted. For one, there is no day and night cycle in this game, which would have been a nice addition. Now, Most Wanted didn't have this either, but it made up for it with the larger world and the nice permanent evening time frame, so that the sun just kind of sits right above the buildings and it casts all these tall shadows over the map. This one takes place entirely at night, which oddly actually could have worked in this game's favor, as you can hide a lot of plain detail in the darkness, but it just never quite reaches that level. Now, it's also another cross-gen game and also a launch title on the PlayStation 3 in particular. And the game does look fairly comparable between both the Xbox 360 and the PS3 versions. I just heard that the PS3 version doesn't pause the game when you're in the menus, so if you need to take a pee break, finish the race first if you're on PS3. And talking briefly about the sound quality in this one, this is pretty solid overall. The cars sound really good. You do get some nice streaking of the tires and the sound of driving over rubble and rocks on the edge of the cliffs. And the soundtrack is very much of the era, so it's nice and it's fun to listen to. In closing here, Carbon is a decent game that feels a bit unambitious when standing next to its predecessor, Most Wanted. The game just feels smaller, almost like a first attempt of these ideas. In fact, if Carbon released first and then we got Need for Speed Most Wanted afterwards, I actually think it would have been a bit more favorable towards it, and it really feels almost like a prelude towards Most Wanted, like a concept or target for a much larger game with all these ideas. And Most Wanted definitely feels like it's a more realized creation in that respect, but as it stands, this game came afterwards, so it doesn't quite live up to that same level of what you would expect a follow-up to be for one of the best Need for Speed titles of all time. On its own, however, it is a solid racing game, and I do have to agree with people that this is probably the last really solid or at least personality-driven Need for Speed experience that we got. The next entries in the series would be trying something completely different, and I do plan to discuss them in a video like this in the future, so if you're interested in hearing more about Need for Speed, stay tuned to the channel and I will get to those when I can. For now though, let me know what you guys think if you played Need for Speed Carbon. Did you play it back when it was new? Did you play Most Wanted? Which do you prefer? I'm actually quite interested to hear what you guys have to say on that front, and we'll go on from there. Hope you guys have a good one, and thank you so much for watching this video.